అమెరికా సివిల్ స్పేస్ జాయింట్ వర్కింగ్ గ్రూప్ సమావేశం
Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer, liebe Zuschauerinnen.
Welcome, dear viewers, dear listeners, to the third part of our short series on the Ten Commandments of God. About 3,000 years ago, God, the Eternal, gave the Ten Commandments through the prophet Moses. They provide orientation for dealing with our fellow human beings and also with nature and animals. The Ten Commandments of God have nothing to do with religion. They are excerpts from the eternal law of love for God and neighbor, and give us practical and concrete help in all situations of life for changing our lives to the positive and for attaining life and peace. In our time, Gabriele, the prophetess and emissary of God, has been active for nearly 50 years, revealing to all people of all cultures the eternal word, the eternal truth from the kingdom of God. From her open consciousness, she has given and still gives, in countless teaching hours, instructions and tips for a life in the Spirit of God. She also explained to us the Ten Commandments of God and interpreted them with the words of the present time. Today we begin with the seventh commandment of God, "You shall not steal." Gabriele explained to us about this. The word steal could be divided into two categories. The first category is theft. The second category is stealing. How quickly we say, but I don't steal. Can we claim this so easily when we know that everything is energy and that our time is also an energy factor? Who is a thief? For example, we could call those people thieves who purloin money and valuable things. Another can be called a thief who steal the time of their fellow people. For example, who carries out long, useless conversations with lots of ifs and buts and doesn't get to the point. Or they hold forth in so-called small talk and never get to the end. Or when someone demands something from another, which they could have done themselves. Or when the one quarrels with the others, because each one wants to be right and none wants to admit to the other their little bit of factual accuracy.
Gabriele erklärt weiter.
Gabriele explained further.
Zeit gleich Energievergeudung.
Wasting time, which is like wasting energy, applies to many situations, in manifold variations, which cannot all be listed here. This and much more is the robbery of energy, whereby the one steals more or less energy from another. Each of us could certainly contribute a whole gamut of examples that are tantamount to theft or stealing. But what's concerned here is not more knowledge about which forms of stealing exist, but what concerns each of us personally is the question, when do we violate the commandment, "You shall not steal"? The 8th commandment of God says, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." Gabriele said about this, to bear false witness means to say something untrue about another, to claim something untrue about oneself before the court, and to make false statements about others. To tell our fellow people what they want to hear, to flatter them, to confirm them in their behavior, but also to think about them differently than what we say, is also deceitfulness and violates the 8th commandment.
Gabriele explained further, the claim that our opinion is the truth can also be put in this category. An opinion always means that we don't precisely know. Our opinion, which we see as truth, is usually a thinking process on our side, a pattern of thought, something we've thought up and that seems logical to us. We then declare this as our opinion. But since an opinion bears witness to not knowing, it can be untrue. That can be considered as bearing false witness. To bear false witness could also be untrue gossip, which we spread in order to achieve a certain purpose with it. With gossip, you can incriminate others. This also violates the 8th commandment. Thus, we should not bear false witness against our fellow people, but should think more often about ourselves, whether we have ourselves under control in terms of our thoughts and words, because what goes out from us is energy and comes back to us at some time or other, whether we spoke or speak out the truth or untruth. Before conversations, those who demand moral values should ask themselves the question, is what I want to say true? Or would it be false witness against my neighbor? When we make the effort to think about the 8th commandment, about bearing false witness, and that everything is energy, including our thoughts, then we should realize that we, every single one of us, are the guarantors for what we emit, whether it is the energy of thoughts, words, or deeds. Can we guarantee that what we say corresponds to the truth? For this reason, we should be the monitoring mechanism over ourselves, the scales. We should become more and more clear about the fact that everything is energy, and that every bit of energy that goes out from us, whether positive or negative, comes back to us. To deliberately bear false witness can be called lying.
Das 9. Gebot Gottes lautet,
The 9th commandment of God reads, "You shall not covet your neighbor's wife." Gabriele explained about this. The word covet contains desire, wanting to possess, the desire to take what I covet in order to consider it my property. The mine and for me, wanting to make something my own, can be broken down with the one word covet. When we want to make our coveting come true, then, in the meaning of the 9th commandment, the wife, that is, the woman, is the property of the one who has acquired her through desire. Figuratively speaking, we can then say that she, the woman, has become the slave of the one who willfully and knowingly coveted her. The same thing can be applied to the man, the husband, or even to a child who is coveted, that is, abused for physical purposes. When a man covets a woman, or a woman a man, or even a man a child, then the question automatically arises, for what purpose? As stated, desire is usually related to the body, through which dependency often develops, that is, modern slavery. If the female slave or the male slave, culminating into compulsive child abuse, has been enjoyed to the full and thus is no longer of interest, then bitterness, emptiness, a feeling of being thrown away and exploited becomes widespread in those who have been dropped. The child that was robbed of its innocence is left behind, often empty, physically and mentally burned out. From this, hatred and perhaps even the desire for revenge often develop. And it would be better for someone who covets and abuses a child if they had not been born. Jesus said the following drastic words about this: "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for them to have a great millstone fastened around their neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea."
Gabriele explained further.
Begehren hat
The word covet has other aspects, such as furtively luring away so-called skilled personnel from big business and firms in order to bring in their know-how or to spy out company secrets, whereby both concern prestige and money. Figuratively speaking, this can also be called a slave trade. Many more, even countless, examples could be given. But may one thing be established: desire has very different facets. In any case, let it be said that those who can be purchased and fall for the coveting, the desire, become modern slaves who hand themselves over to their purchaser and thus are and remain unfree until they remember what would actually be the first step toward freedom. It is, stay true to yourself. The second step could be, pay attention to the lines that are laid out to catch you. The third step would be, don't let yourself be lured away. Make your own application by acquiring a good, specialized professional training, which gives you joy and with which you earn your salary. For all good workers are worthy of their salary. The fourth step could be, watch out for flattery, which comes before coveting and desire. Ask yourself, what happens when the train of lust has left the station? Who are you then? Perhaps a burned-out car that doesn't really know which track it's standing on.
The 10th commandment of God says, "You shall not covet anything that is your neighbor's." The 10th commandment of God through Moses, so Gabriele, lets us look deeper when we look at our earth, which God gave to all people so that it could nourish his human children. What has humankind made of the planet Earth? Ultimately, an island divided into parcels, Those who have inherited and acquired money and property possess a correspondingly large piece of land, a large parcel of land, which they call their property. Others possess only a little tiny piece of this big, divided up cake called earth. Still others have no parcel of their own. They are workers who earn their bread and that of their family. They, their wives, and children live from these earnings, just scraping by. The owners of large parcels, the big capitalists, have the work done by so-called workers and employees on the parcel they own, their parcel island. They themselves live splendidly and enjoy, ultimately through the work of others, the mine and for me, that is their life. They don't need to earn their daily bread like the workers, the employees do. The others do it for them. The workers, the employees, receive their salary from this, and the owners their capital, which they invest accordingly, in order to thus increase their property. Gabriele continued that this inequality, which is growing ever greater, can lead to envy, hatred, covetousness, and the like. It cannot be denied. When we think about the fact that in our time, the rich are becoming ever richer and the poor ever poorer. And how much more clearly does the 10th commandment ring in our ears today? Jesus of Nazareth said already, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God."
Gabriele explained further. This statement can be related to the parceling of the planet Earth. The words of Jesus trouble the rich still less than formerly, when still more heart was weighed on the personal test bench and the works of neighborly love were measured. Today, everyone is their own best friend. But what counted yesterday also counts today. No one can take their money and property along with them into the beyond. So as it was for the rich earlier, so it is also today. No one can go through the so-called eye of a needle because the heavenly kingdom is still far away for rich people. Where then will their poor soul be when their wealth no longer counts? The law of sowing and reaping will bring it all into balance. For this reason, it is not worth it to covet your neighbor's property. Dear viewers, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of today's program on the 10 Commandments of God. Gabriele's comments make it clear that God's commandments have lost none of their relevance since Moses. On the contrary, they are more topical than ever, especially in our time, since they teach us how to deal ethically and morally with life in its entirety. This includes not only our fellow human beings, but also the Mother Earth, with the diverse life that she sustains, including animals, plants, and minerals. A possible change of mind in times of climate change and of war toward a life in peace and unity at the beginning of the Messianic Sophianic age. With this, we take our leave of you. Goodbye and a heartfelt greetings in God.
Liebe Schwestern, liebe Brüder,
Dear sisters, dear brothers, in the communities under the sign of the lily,
zu Gott in uns
the path to God in us is a path of evolution that concerns every single one of us,
seinen Bewusstsein,
because each one of us has his state of consciousness.
an dem wir bestrebt
Each
sind,
day
uns
on
selbst
which
zu
we make
erkennen und
efforts
zu
to
hinterfragen,
recognize ourselves
lernen wir,
and to question ourselves, we learn what the contents of our feelings, sensations, thoughts, and words are.
wir lernen, uns zu erkennen,
We learn to recognize ourselves,
was
and
zwischen
thus
Gott
to
und
overcome
uns
what stands between God and us.
die Inhalte
The
unserer
contents of
Gefühle,
our feelings, sensations, and thoughts are often what we do not want to figure out or express.
nicht aussprechen wollen. Darüber haben wir uns folgende Gedanken gemacht.
We had the following
Können wir
thoughts
alles,
about
was
this.
wir denken, aussprechen?
Can we express everything that we are
In
thinking?
unseren Gesprächen
In our
haben wir
conversations,
Folgendes
we worked out
herausgearbeitet.
the following.
Sind wir gewillt,
Are we willing to figure out the contents of our thoughts,
oder wollen wir sie
or
noch
do we
verbergen?
still want to hide them?
Wenn ja,
If yes,
dann leben
then
wir zu
we
sehr nach
live too
außen
much turned
und
to
lassen
without,
uns von den
letting
Eindrücken der
ourselves
Welt
be
beflügeln.
stimulated by the impressions of the
Daraus
world.
ergibt sich,
The result of this is that we are still too much of a bubbling spring that thinks and does not question why we think as we do.
wie denkt. Auf dem Weg geistigen Lernens
On our path of spiritual learning, among other things, we have learned to pause for a moment and ask ourselves, why am I thinking this way? What lies behind my thoughts?
Im Großen und
Seen
Ganzen
as a whole,
betrachtet,
we are shocked about ourselves
selbst erschrocken.
because there is still many a thing that lies behind them.
Oftmals
Often it is the convenience and the indifference, but also our useless chatter that has to be coming from somewhere.
herkommen muss. Dabei
In doing so, we questioned ourselves
sehr wohl
as to where this useless chatter comes from.
bei dem gewissen
With a certain self-questioning, we have already caught ourselves.
eventuell
Perhaps we wanted to exalt ourselves by pretending something that is not.
nicht ist. Wir gingen einen
We
Schritt
went
weiter
a
in der
further step
Überlegung.
in our reflection.
Was wir verbergen
What we
wollen,
want to hide has to already lie in our thoughts.
das,
That is,
was wir
what we
also
show
von uns
of
geben.
ourselves.
Unser vieles
So
Gerede
all our chatter
ist also
is
eine
a
gewisse
certain
Unsicherheit
insecurity or even the desire for aggrandizement,
mit dem
with the
Hintergedanken,
ulterior motive that the other one may fortify our little ego with which we would be satisfied,
von dem
animated
vermeintlichen
by the
Wunsch,
secret wish to have attained a minimal sense of being appreciated.
dann kamen wir zum
Then we
Geheimnis,
came to the secret that has to lie somewhere in our feelings and sensations.
Wir haben weiter geforscht.
We continued to examine what might be lying behind a possible secret
Und sind bei unserer
and reached our own sensations.
Dabei haben wir
In
erkannt,
doing so, we recognized that our feelings are nebulous, but that images build up in our sensations,
bauen. Bilder,
images of what we may want to be and yet are not,
Bilder,
images of wanting to convince others of our own image perceptions, or that others do things of which they are not convinced.
von denen sie nicht überzeugt sind. Wir haben weiter geforscht.
We continued to examine ourselves and came to realize that in reality, we want to achieve something with our neighbor. And we continued to search and saw that sensations, like thoughts, carry pictures which we may very well want to hide.
Was wir verbergen wollen,
What we want to hide is our secret,
eventuell Bilder des
perhaps
Neides
images of envy,
bei anderen,
in order to look good to others, to our neighbor.
es können auch verborgene
It can
Bilder
also
sein,
be hidden images that carry hatred and brutality in
die
themselves,
sich unter
which may,
Umständen
perhaps,
in Gedanken
build into
aufbauen,
thoughts that are passed on with deceptive words
trügerische Worte
and
weitergegeben
with the
werden.
corresponding behavior patterns
Das
of the
überentsprechende
individual.
Verhaltensmuster des Einzelnen. Aus solchen Bildfolgen kann
Much
vieles
can be
abgeleitet
derived
werden.
from such picture sequences.
Auf diese Weise
Also,
kann
in
ein
this
Geheimnis
way, a
entarten
secret can
und zur Wirkung
degenerate
kommen.
and come into effect.
Bei näherem
By looking
Betrachten
more
und
closely and
Analysieren
analyzing it,
ist es vielfach
in many cases,
unvorstellbar,
it is
was sich in
unimaginable
Gedanken
what is
verbirgt,
hidden in thoughts,
was der
what a
Mensch
person may
eventuell
be
mit
quoting with
schönen
nice or
oder
even
gar
not so
unschönen
nice
Worten
words,
entkleidet
and that can
und
come
was zur
into
gegebenen
effect
Zeit
in due
zur
course,
Auswirkung kommen kann.
depending on
Je
what has
nachdem,
been built up
was sich
in the
in den
sensations
Empfindungen
as picture
als
sequences.
Bildvorstellungen aufgebaut hat. Unsere Gespräche über
Our
das
conversations
Hinterfragen
about
oder
questioning
nicht
or not
hinterfragen
questioning ourselves,
geben wir an die
we now
Geschwister
pass
in
on
den
to the brothers and
Gemeinschaften im
sisters
Zeichen der
in
Lilie
the
weiter.
communities under the sign
Daraus
of the lily.
könnten sich unter anderem
Among other things,
Gesprächsthemen
conversation topics may result from this.